The Mishnah in the beginning, Megillah, begins, Megillah Nikris, B'Yid Aleph, B'Yid Beis, B'Yid Gimel, B'Yid Daled, B'Tezvav, L'Pachas, L'Yoter. So the Mishnah tells us that we have 5 days we read the Megillah. We're familiar with 14 and 15, and the Mishnah explains 15 for the walled cities during the time of Yoshua ben Nun, 14 for everyone else, and there was a special dispensation for the Kfarim, who used to come in anyway on Yom HaKnisa, depending on what the day was, whether it was 11, 12, 13, they used to come in and read the Megillah. In fact, it's interesting, Cheshek Shlomo, and Shlomo Vilna will point out, how many times does it say the word Purim in the Megillah? So, I didn't count, but I'll trust him on it. He said 5 times. He says, Purim is spelled Mole twice, and it's spelled Chaser 3 times. He says, why? Because the first Mishnah Megillah. There are 2 real days of Purim, Yud Daled and Tezvav, and the other days are quasi-Purim regarding Kriyas HaMegillah. So that's what he points out, that the Kfarim used to come in, and why from the time of Yoshua ben Nun? So the Bavli doesn't really say. The Bavli goes to it on Beis Amud Beis. It ends up some Gzeira Shava. They make up Prazi. But Rishonim quote the Yerushalmi, L'chale kavod le'eretz Yisrael. Because how would it look? During that time, Eretz Yisrael wasn't built up. It wasn't a walled city. And if you're going to go by the time of Shushan, Achashverosh, it'll end up apparently it's more covered to be a walled city and to read under 15. So it'll be a Genai to Eretz Yisrael, so therefore L'chale kavod le'eretz Yisrael, they will go by Yoshua ben Nun. The Meiri adds another dimension, that Yoshua is the first one to attack Amalek. And therefore Amalek Haman, so there's also a connection there. And the Rashba asks, but what do you mean? We have a famous machlokas in many Gemaras, including Megillah, regarding the status of Eretz Yisrael b'chorbano. We know that when the Beis HaMikdash was up, there's a machlokas whether it's Kedusha l'shaisa or Kedusha l'Asid Lavo. So, discussion in the Gemara and the Rishonim. So the Rashba writes Bishcholm, according to those who hold it has Kedusha l'Asid Lavo. I understand l'chale kavod l'Eretz Yisrael. But why, if there's no Kedusha, why l'chale kavod? So the Rashba answers, there's 2 different Nakudas. As we know, that there's 2 aspects of Kedusha Eretz Yisrael. There's their inherent Kedusha from the time of Avram Avinu. It's the land given to the Avos, to the Jewish people. And there's a second level from the time of Yoshua Ezra, that the Sheva Shekifshu and the Sheva Shechilku, it wasn't until year 15 where the laws of Trumas and Ma'aser Shemitah applied. So the 2 aspects, in fact, that's why they share, there's like the 2 aspects of Kedusha Shabbos. There's Kedusha Shabbos and Kedusha Shabbos. If Kedusha Shabbos is Kiva Vakaima, it's inherent, that's one aspect. And there's a second level of Eretz Yisrael, like Yontif, Makadesh Yisrael V'Azmanam. So that's what the Rashba says. Even though it might not have the full Kedusha, but this what they call Shem Eretz Yisrael, there's still a concept, there's still an inherent value, a level of Kedusha, even if it's not Kadosh enough for Trumas and Ma'aser, it's still separate. So that's why the Rashba points out, and the Rishonim that we want to give, based on the Yerushalmi, to give kavod l'Eretz Yisrael, we go by Yeshua ben Nun. And so there's an interesting machlokes, Rashi and Tosfos in the beginning of the Masechta. Actually Tosfos is in Yevamos, but Rashi is here. So as we pointed out, there was a special dispensation on day 11, 12, or 13, whatever it might have been. The villagers go into the towns to do everything they have to do, plus to do the Megillah. So who's reading the Megillah for them? So Rashi writes Pashtus, it's B'nai Ha'ir. That's the whole reason they're coming. They weren't B'kiyim, they didn't know how to read the Megillah or anything else. So therefore, the B'nai Ha'ir someone from B'nai Ha'ir, the Baal Koreh used to go and read it. That's what Rashi writes. Tosfos in Yevamos says, what are you talking about? That can't be true. We have a famous cloud, the Mishnah Rosh Hashanah, we have it throughout Shas, that one has to be a Mechuyev B'davar in order to be Motzi someone else. To say Shomei HaKahona, if I'm on the least, I have to at least be on the same level of obligation. If I can be higher, but I can't be lower. And therefore, what is Rashi talking about? How could the Bnei Ha'ir be Yotzei Bnei HaKfarim? They have two different chiyuvim. One's chayav on the 14th, so how could the Baal Korah, who's chayav on the 14th, be Yotzei all the other ones who are chayav on 11, 12, or 13?
Same chiyuv, it's just a question of a day.
Right, right, so we'll see, so that would be one of the pshatim. Right, so Tosfos furthers his kasha, he writes, and the Yerushalmi writes, that just like the Yerushalmi tells us, that a Ben Krach can't read for a Ben Hir, and a Ben Hir can't read. Someone who lives in the city can't read the Megillah on the 15th for someone in the walled city, and the reverse. So we see that if you're not Mechuyev b'Davar, you can't read. So we'll see. So there are different answers. One answer given is it's not a kasha. We're talking about a din d'Rabbanan. So obviously, when the Chachamim set up the din of the Bnei HaKfarim, that was the takana. The takana was that people from Bnei Ha'ir read for them. So it's not a kasha, how could they do it? That's what some say. Others point out, it's also like, the Tziv talks about it in the Mishnah Megillah, it wasn't really Shomei HaKaoneh. That's the whole discussion by Mikra Bikurim, is the whole shir on Shomei HaKaoneh, not for now. But they point out, what did they actually do, the farmers? So there is one shot, that it wasn't nothing to do with Shomei HaKaoneh. The Kohen said, and the farmer then also said it. So he wasn't doing it by heart. So that's what someone I say along the lines here. Einachinami. Bnei Akfar did read it themselves, but first they had to tell them how to read. So you repeat after me. And they went through the Megillah, that's what some say. But others point out, like you're saying, that, what do you mean? What's the kasha? Bishlam ben Krach or ben Ha'ir. It gets into what is the Geder Hadin of a Bar Chiyuva. In other words, like before we get into the Lamdis, this what's Rashi, the Machlok is Rashi and Tosfos, because they point out that what's considered, if I'm Mechuyev a Mikra Megillah, so by definition the day is not important. That's the way Rashi seems to. Or Tosfos says no, it has to be more than that. So how far do we go? So Tosfos says that Ben Krach can't read for a Ben Hir, but as the Ran and other Rishonim say, but even if you, so one you could say it's a fundamental Machlokas Yerushalmi Bavli, but you don't have to say that. Even the Bavli would agree to the Yerushalmi that a Ben Krach can't read for Ben Hir, but here's it totally different. Basically, a Ben Kfar is really a Ben Yudalid. It's a special dispensation because of the Metzias. They couldn't find the Baal Korah, they couldn't get together. So that's why it's the same din. In fact, what's the Raya the Ran writes? What did those people do for the Suda? What do they do for Shalach Manas? There's a whole discussion on Purim, Meshulish, Yerushalayim, how you split it up. So, but clearly the Ran writes that doing Shalach Manas, Suda, they're doing it on Yudalit. So they're basically considered a Ben Yudalit, and therefore it's not a kasha. It's not Tosfos kasha and Rashi isn't a kasha. And in fact, and even the Gemara's Maram is that what happened to the Ben Kfar even ends up in the city on Yom Yudalit, he's Mechuyev in Kriyas and Megillah. So that's a Raya, he's really considered a Ben Yudalit. So that's a fundamental machlokes, Rashi and the Bali Tosfos on who actually read the Megillah. So according to Rashi, it was the Bnei Ha'ir. And Tosfos says, no, it's the Ben Kfar. They had to read. So why did they have to come into the city? It was a pragmatic thing. They couldn't get their act together, etc. And in fact, it's interesting, Rashba points out that even that by Megillah, even though it's a din d'Rabbanan, Pashas, we still make a Shechiyanu. Because he quotes the Rashi in the beginning of Megillah, by Bir Chametz is a mitzvah we do once a year, and yet we don't make a Shechiyanu. Why don't we make a Shechiyanu on Bir Chametz? So the different reasons given, that others say it's a din of Hashchasa, we don't make a bracha, but the Rashba writes because there's no set zman. Obviously, if you're around, you do it the night before, but if you're leaving 2 weeks early, perhaps even 2 months, so it's not a set zman, so they only set up a Shechiyanu if there's a set zman. He'll say to Rashi, but what about my Megillah? You can read at 11, 12, 13. So he says it's true that it's not one zman, but it's a finite. There's a time only between 11 and 15, and therefore that's why he says there is a Shechiyanu, as we do have one. And interesting, there is actually, the Shulchan Aruch even brings down an extreme shita, that perhaps even if the only time you could lane Megillah is get to Gimel Adar, Dalet Adar, so you read without the brachas, obviously, but they say to read. Whether it's a din of tashlumin, or before you even do it, but not in Pasha Shanan Yotzi, the real Chiyah, but there is a extreme shita like that. But that's what they point out. That's the machlokes Rashi and Tosfos on who reads it. Is it the B'nai Yair or is it the B'nai Kfar? And in fact, on the actual beginning of the Mishnah, it says Megillah Nikris. So there's the famous Gra, which is also a Ritva and a Rashba, that he compares and contrasts the first Mishnah in Brachas. The first Mishnah in Brachas is Meimasai Korin, and here it says Megillah Nikris. So the Gra others ask, what's the difference? Why by Kriya Shema does it say Korin, and by Megillah it says Nikris? So the Rishonim write, and the Gra writes, because it's teaching me the din of Shomea Ka'oneh, that normally, let's say on a regular Friday night, usually what's the minhag is, usually every family has their own minhag, but in a place where one person makes kiddush and everyone listens, it's working. Everyone's chayiv to make their own kiddush, both men and women. But midin shomea ka'oneh yiyotze. So the Ritva, the Rashba, right? There is no shomea ka'oneh by Kriya Shema. Different reasons, because maybe it needs kol ram, or you have to do makabel omach shamayim. That's the famous Beis Halevi. We'll speak about another time. Machlokes Beis Halevi and the Tziv, whether you say shomea ka'oneh by birkas kohanim. That if there's only one, there's many kohanim, but could one kohen say it and everyone else listens? That's the discussion there. Whether you could say lechatchila shomea ka'oneh. It gets into the lumdus of Shemaya, what's found in Shemaya Ka'oneh, what's the Chiddush? The Chiddush is that, am I Yotzi through Shmiya? Is that the Chiddush? Or no, is that I'm actually, it's like Tzvis's Gavra, I'm actually becoming it, so they get into that child yet. So that's why by Kriya Shema it says Korin, Masha'in K by Megillah Nikris, because we paskin by Megillah, Shemaya Ka'oneh works. That's what the Ritva and the Gra explain the Chiluk. Rav Hudner explains more derech machshava, the lashon korin, because when you have to be active. When you're being mekaba omach shamayim, you got to do it yourself. You got to be active. So the lashon korin, doing active. But Purim, Megillah Nikris, it just happened. That's the whole Purim story. That the only book in Tanakh, which is Hester Panim, there's no Shem Hashem in the book, and the whole concept of working behind the scenes. In fact, that's the famous discussion. We know there are many similarities between Hanukkah and Purim. And that's why when you have differences, it's interesting to point out what the differences are, because if something's very different, you don't have to, it's not a big deal to find a difference. But when they're similar, you look for differences. So one of the famous differences is, on Hanukkah we say Hallel, on Purim we don't say Hallel. There's a famous Gemara in Megillah, Erechin, why don't we say Hallel on Purim? So the Gemara gives three answers. The answer number one the Gemara gives is because it's a nace that happened in Chutz La'aretz. Chanukah happened in Eretz Yisrael, but Purim happened in Chutz La'aretz, and we only type of nace that warrants Hallel is a nace that happens in Eretz Yisrael. You asked me, last I checked, you'd see us Mitzrayim did not happen in Israel, so what do you mean? We say Hallel on that, so we have an account. So the Gemara says the old grandfather clause, that when does it apply? Once Yoshua entered Eretz Yisrael, then if it's not in Eretz Yisrael, then it becomes an issue. But Kodem Eretz Yisrael, obviously happening in Mitzrayim wasn't an issue. So that's number one, is a nace that happens in Chutz La'aretz, so there's no Hallel. The answer number two is Kriyasa zu Hallel. What do you mean no Hallel? There is a Hallel. Kriyasa Megillah is the Hallel. And the third answer is Akate Avde Achashverosh Anan. It's true that we were free from the Gzeira Lahashme Lahaver, it's called Yehudim Tafanashim, but still we were still under the domain of Achashverosh, and the only time one can say Hallel if you're in the category Avdei Hashem and not Avdei Paro. So that's the three answers the Gemara gives. So there's a fundamental difference between them. According to answer number 1 and 3, it's not a day that warrants Hallel. The question doesn't get off. It didn't happen in Eretz Yisrael, so end the discussion. Or number 3, you warrant Avdei Hashem, so end the discussion. However, according to answer number 2, really we're saying fundamentally it is a day of Hallel, but instead of Hallel we're doing Kriyas HaMegillah. So much so that the Meiri writes, what happens if you live in a big town, small town, you're out in Hawaii, wherever you might be, and you don't have a Megillah where you are? So the Shaila, do you say Hallel on Purim in a place where you don't have a Megillah Esther? So the Meiri says yes. But he takes it to the logical extreme. If Kriyas is Halela and there is no Kriyas Megillah, so we have to go to the default position. It's really a day that's Mechayiv in Hallel, and therefore yes. However, we don't paskin like this Meiri. So the question is, why not? It seems very compelling with the logics there of the Meiri. If you assume the answer number 2 is, maybe we don't paskin like number 2, but if you assume answer number 2 is correct, which the Rambam seems to go with at different times, but so how come we don't paskin like the Meiri? So the Mefarshim explain because there's a fundamental difference. There's 2 types of Hallel. There's many types of Hallel, but there's the Hallel HaMitzri, the one we're familiar with. The Hallel you say over Nisim, the flows, God breaks the laws of Teva. It's you have that type of Hallel over the Nisim, Niglim, and then there's the Hallel of the Derech HaTeva, seeing God in nature behind the scenes. So that is the beautiful Meshach Chochmah. As the Meshach Chochmah explains, the Gemara tells us in Brachas, one who says Ashrei 3 times a day is Zochet Olam Haba. Yet the Gemara tells us in Shabbos that one who says Hallel every day is a Megadev and a Macharev. And the Rishonim point out, doesn't mean every day, it means any day which doesn't warrant a Hallel. So Hallel Yom HaAtzmaut, that's a separate share, whether it warrants it or not. But that's so, last I checked, Ashrei comes in the book of Tehillim, and Hallel comes in Tehillim. So what's going on here? If I say Ashrei, I'm the greatest. If I say Hallel, I'm terrible. So that's what the Meshach Chochmah explains. Because the Hallel, what we call the Hallel Mitzri, if the only time you see God is when He does Nisim, you're as good as your last step out. I'll be a Maimin when I see. So then you're a Magadev. If all you see, the only time you see God when He does the Nates for you, then you're missing the whole essence. But Ashrei is in the form of Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. When you see God in the everyday things, then you're going to be, with that type of attitude, then you're going to be Zocha to Olam Haba. And that's why the pshat that the Megillah says to them. That's what he's saying Megillah Nikris, that it's Derech HaTeva. It looks like one big coincidence, but really, it's God behind the scenes. That's the Lashon Nikris. That's the Rav Hutner explains the chiluk between Lashon Korin versus Lashon Nikris.
With respect to the 3 reasons why we say hello, we don't on Shni Shel Pesach, Chol Moed Pesach, we don't say it because of Shni Shel Pesach. Ma'aseh Yoreh Tov Bayom B'Atim Moshiach. Should we same argument for all the people who killed thousands of people in the Purim and second day Purim killed more people? So maybe that's another reason we shouldn't be saying hello. Is anybody doing such a svara?
Yeah, I mean that's the whole right. I mean that's a discussion. Like in general, how do we make the distinction? Every yontif has, what's the pshat? Ma'aseh Yadai Tovim Mayam, like all of it. And what about? So how can we say the shaila they bring up is? So what about Leil Pesach? How can we say Pesach? How can we say Hallel Leil Pesach? It's Makas Kohoros. So they get into the whole nature of the Hallel. The famous Ran in the end of Arei Psachim. He asks, how come in the Seder, again, there's a Hallel that's a Machokas Ashkenaz Svardim, based on the Yerushalmi, whether you say a Hallel in Shul, so the straight psak of the Machaber is yes, and the Ramah says no, even though many Ashkenaz Shuls do say it because the Briskers of Soloveitchik had many Talmidim who were rabbis in Young Israel, and his shita was that you do say a Hallel, because they held it's a Hallel Shokriya, Hallel Shodeis. But Rav Haigon over there, Ran quotes Rav Haigon, why don't we say Hallel on Leil Seder with the bracha? Because that's a Hallel that of spontaneous. That what you're not going to, wait, God, why am I thanking you? Because you commanded me to. It's supposed to look like we're doing it on our own, and therefore, we're just spouting out praise. So they get into the whole issue of Hallel is the different days when you say Hallel, when you don't say Hallel. So the Gemara in Erechim goes into it. The Gemara actually gives two reasons why don't we say Hallel during Pesach, full Hallel on the rest of Pesach, either because of Masa Yadai Tovim Bayam, or the Gemara gives another reason because it's not Cholok B'Karban. The Gemara gives two independent reasons why you chayiv in Hallel. Either you need the big three, it has to be a Moed, it has to be an Isser Malacha, and it has to be and it has to have your own carbon, because the Gemara says, what about Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? It has all three, but it's not a day appropriate to, but the Sifrei Chayim and Sifrei Mesim, so you don't say, what about Shabbos? Shabbos is in a Moed, at least according to this Gemara. There's two different psukim that included, sometimes it doesn't. And what about Rosh Chodesh? It's Iktish Basiyas Malacha. It's a Moed, but it's not Iktish Basiyas Malacha. That's the Avnei Nesa. What about Shabbos Rosh Chodesh? So he says, no, but it's a different Machayev. You need one Machayev for both. The Gemara's conclusion is it has to be a Moed. You need all three of these: Moed, Cholok B'Karban, and Iktish Basiyas Malacha. If you have all three, then it's a day that warrants Hallel. So Gemara says, so what do you mean Chanukah doesn't meet the big three? It doesn't have that. Yeah, well, it's not even in the Torah, so it can't be a Moed. The Karban might have, but then no, it's not Iktish Malachas. The Gemara says you're right. There's another reason also. It's a Yom She'ira Bones. It's the day that the miracle happened. So the two independent reasons: either it's a day that the miracle happened, or a day you need the big three. So that's what the Mefarshim point out. Why do we need the reason of Masa Yadai Tovim Bayam? Where the Gemara already gave us a reason. It doesn't have its own carbon. So that's what the Mefarshim point out. No, so because there's two different reasons why on Shvi Shel Pesach I'll say Hallel. Number one, out the Moed. So then the Gemara says it's not Cholok B'Karban Osam. Okay, but Kriyas Yamsif the Yom Shira Bones. That's what the Gemara is called. Masa Yadai Tovim Bayam Atem Omer Shira. So the child is, but yet the Gemara says that in Ari Pacham the Jews did sing Shira. Moshe said it and they so the Mefarshim point out, no, so because it says they're rebuking the Malachim. It's the angels can't sing Shira because the Jews are in danger. If you're involved in the mitzvah yourself, in the danger, and you're saved, so it's clear you're thanking God because you were saved from danger, not because you're gloating on other people dying. So if you yourself were saved from Yeshua, then you could say Hallel. But the Malachim who weren't involved, they were up there safe in heaven, they have no right to sing Shira when other people. So the Shaila is, so what about Leal Pesach? Then by Makas Bachoros, how could we say Hallel? So that's what the Mefarshim point out. We have a mitzvah Leal Pesach, perhaps the hardest mitzvah of Leal Pesach. Chayiv Adam L'ros Atzmo Hu Yatza Mitzrayim, and that's what that. Exactly, and that's why Leficha. That's the pshat in the Haggadah. Lefichach Shira Chadasha. That's the whole pshat. The only reason we're allowed to sing a Hallel Leal Pesach it's not because it's the anniversary of what happened. We ourselves, that's why it's a Shira Chadash. We're in Shira Chadash. They've been singing Hallel, but it's a Shira Al Nes. And that's why anyway, in general, it's a Shira Al Nes. If you sing it for yourself, then it's not a Shiloh. That's why in 1948 there wasn't a Shiloh. You could say Hallel. The Shiloh is the anniversary of a Nes. That's the whole discussion in terms, Netziv, Chasam Sofer, etc.
So that's the difference between V'nemer and V'noimer.
Right. Different. Yeah. So that's what they point. So they do get. That's what they get into. Am I allowed to sing Shira when Osama bin Laden was killed? That. So it gets into how you mayashev the different. On one hand, it says we celebrate the death. Risham Rina. The sources in both directions. Then it depends on. Some make a difference between Chayim versus Racha Misa. The different chilukim in the Mefarshim, when you do, when you don't. But that's what they point out. That, but I didn't actually see them say it by Purim, but it would be the same concept there. In fact, that's the kasha the Rabbi asked in the beginning of Megillah. He says, "What's going on here?" He says, "Torah achasi." We always try to go for achdus, unity. We celebrate our Yom Tovim together. Of course, in Israel, Yom Tov Sheni, that's something else. But he says, how is it that he points out that Chazal instituted 2 different days? Yud Dalet for the cities and Tezvav, the walled cities. Like, what happened to Torah Achasi? We don't find this anywhere else around us. So the Rabbi wants to answer. Some point out that since the Nisim happened in different times, different days, so wherever they were, on the 14th they were celebrating, so therefore they picked that day, the 15th. But still, well, why didn't they pick a set day? So there's an interesting Be'er Yosef, or Yosef Selevan, I think the Binyan Shlomo says something similar as well, that the Gemara raises the Shaila Megillah regarding Purim about the issue of Baal Tosef, how can they institute a new Yontif? We know Ein Navi Rashi Chadish Shava Miata, and interesting. Rashi points out the question. Yeah, right. How could you? The Heichen Tivanu is in Shabbos, over there, but right. So, but in Megillah also Yidalo, where they talk about here. So they say Rashi points out that the Gemara never was bothered by Hanukkah. The bottom line, Esther and Mordechai worked it out. They got permission. It was a Shaila, and they worked it out. So whatever the lumdus is, Purim's not a problem. We can celebrate it. But the Gemara never asked the question about Hanukkah. So the Rashi is pointing out that because since Purim is Divrei Kabbalah, so then already it could be a conflict. People might think, like with Rabbanim, they weren't worried about it. But so the Cheshek Shlomo and Be'er Yosef say similar, that since there are 2 psukim in the Torah regarding Baal Tosef, about Tigran, and one's in the plural, one's Lashon Rabim, one's Lashon Yochid. So what do you need? Both are the different answers given. So one shot is the different types of. So when it says Lashon Rabim, that's L'chol Echad V'Echad. That's for me. I can't put on 5 parshas of tefillin, 5 edim in my lulav. But what's Lashon Yochid is to the basin. What do you mean basin? To the Rambam writes that if basin goes ahead and says, you know what, cooking chicken and milk together is an issur d'oraisa, they violate Baal Tosef. You can't misrepresent what the Torah is. So that's what the Be'er Yosef says here. He says Chazal wanted to go out of the way to make sure people don't think Purim. You know what? Purim, it's Nevi'im, that, or it's in the Chaf Dalet. Maybe they're going to think Purim is a biblical law, and we have a big problem here of Baal Tosef. So Chazal, inherent in the institution, I know a dead giveaway. We'll make the 14th here, 15th here. They'll say, what's going on there? It's crazy. Then, it's not a biblical law. So one of the ways to try to make it clear that it's not a problem about Tosef, that's what he throws in Derek Jewish. And he says the same thing, interesting, he says by Hanukkah. By Hanukkah, that's why we don't find anywhere else. We have Ner Ishu Beiso, we have Mahadrin, and we have Mahadrim in a Mahadrim. Where else do we have a mitzvah which has 3 levels? He says again, because that was the whole way Chazal set it up, they wanted to make it clear that
40, 50, 60. Even though Chita Achas Parker is a Kri, but still, we have different levels. So maybe
I'm saying, so he, but, I guess in terms of, I guess it gets into Truma, what's the exact mitzvah in terms of maybe it's an issur tevya here, I guess he means in a real, regular mitzvah, right, but he says, even though not that we don't have it by June, he's saying, but Chazal went out of their way to show, trying to make Ner Hanukkah different than the classical mitzvah. Normally there's one way to fulfill a mitzvah, and that's it, you always have a l'chadchila b'di'eved, but here it's more than just l'chadchila b'di'eved. Here you have a mahadrin, and you have a mahadrin. So they say it's all part of that issue. They wanted to avoid the issue about Tosef and about Tigra, so therefore they set it up. That's what they point out over here. by Yudalit and Tezvav, they wanted to make sure that Chazal, that people, they wanted to make sure they weren't over about Tosef, because that was the whole discussion, in the Gemara. That's the whole question by Purim, because by Chanukah, it's a clear Durabanan, so therefore, there's nothing to talk about. But by Purim, it's in Megillas Esther, so it's in no man's land, because there's three different levels. There's a mitzvahs midivrei Torah, that's from the Torah, and then we have mitzvahs Durabanan, and then we have what we call it divrei Kabbalah, things in the, not Kabbalah, Madonna, but Kabbalah. So from the Nevi'im, right? So the Shaila is, what is the status of Divrei Kabbalah? That's a Machokas and the Rishonim. Do we view Divrei Kabbalah K'Divrei Torah Dami, or is Divrei Kabbalah K'Drabanan? Like, because there's a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah which seems to imply, well, it says it, but I'll tell you why it's not foolproof. The Gemara does have the expression in Rosh Hashanah, Divrei Kabbalah K'Divrei Torah Dami. But what's the context? Is the Gemara is talking about things that require chizuk. So they had, during those days, we have Megillas Tainus. So, and those were days of Isser to fast and eulogies. So not only was it also on that day, but they added Ufano La'acharav, the day before and the day after, in order to give credence, give chizuk, so they added it. In fact, that's what's a big kasha. Purim, how can we fast? This year is not a problem. How can we fast on Megillas Esther? It's the day before Purim. So that's a whole discussion. They deal with that shaila. But
what about some Gedalia? There you're stuck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, some Gedalia because it's unless they have to go with those going to fasted on Rosh. Yeah, right? Because saying some Gedalia the day right. So, we don't fast on, according to those who fasted on Rosh Hashanah, you mean?
Even for those, but since Rosh Hashanah is a 2-day Yom Tov versus...
Right.
So we postponed it to the next day. So
right.
It's still a day after the other.
Exactly, yes, right, exactly, yeah, it's from that angle, right. So that's what they point out, is how... So the Gemara says, alright, so what about Rosh Chodesh then? How can we let people fast? In fact, some people, Erev Rosh Chodesh, Yom Kippur Katan, how can we let them? So they point out that the Divrei Torah, Divrei Derabanan Srichin Chizek, Divrei Torah Ein Sarah Chizek. So therefore, that's the Gemara has the expression. And so what about and Divrei Kabbalah Ki Divrei Torah Dami? So that's the shaila. So some Rishonim say, so what? We got at the special din in Chizek. Yeah, you're right. Divrei Torah Ki Divrei Torah. We go gabe chizuk, but generally we don't view divrei, we don't deal divrei Kabbalah ke divrei Torah. Like other Rishonim say in I think there's the Ramban points out elsewhere. He seems to say divrei Kabbalah ke Drabanan. In other places we'll have to get into maybe one next week, but where they show that Divrei Kabbalah is Daraisa. That's the famous Orchas Chaya the Ramah brings down for an Onein on Purim. So that normally is an Isser of Basar of a Yayin of an Onein. So the Ramah quotes in the Orchas Chayim that an Onein is permitted to have Basar of a Yayin on Purim, because the Lashon is because the assay of the mitzvah derabam of simcha overrides the Isser asay of asay de yachid. So, in other words, the way the Orchas Chayim learns, he learns that the way the Mepharshim explained it, he's learning it Divrei Kabbalah. Purim's a real din daraisa. So we'll have to get, that's a whole separate topic, Divrei Kabbalah ke Divrei Torah Dami, in terms of how you view Purim. There'll be many nafkaminas to that.
Is that because of Kimmel B'Kibbel? Because the word Kimmel was used, or just that's irrelevant? No, terminology is not relevant. Right.
They do that. They use Kimmel B'Kibbel by. That's how they're relevant by prati, but not in this discussion. It's not relevant. They don't bring that down as a reason. That's what it is brought up. Megillah is different. Megillah is treat it. We don't make a Gzeira Shabbat by any other book except Megillah. So you have that for other things, but I haven't actually seen them bring it down. I haven't seen them, bring it down there. Just to and yeah. So just to conclude, as my daughter's getting ready to be picked up. So in fact, this year, usually Megillah Esther. We get into the whole different Kabbalah topic next week, but the interesting. So we know we fast on Thursday this year, Taanis Esther. A week Thursday. However, it's not so pasha. It was a machlokas rishonim on when some rishonim felt you should fast on Friday. Other rishonim felt we never fast on Friday except for like a Sarah B'Teva. That's an exception to Avidram Be'etzam Hayom Hazeh. And in fact, you're not supposed to go in hungry. Ideally, you don't. And others say others say you're not supposed to eat too much. And Rav Ram says in general you shouldn't have meat even on Shabbos. So we have. The Rishonim say, some Rishonim say that no, you should fast just like we do at Sarah B'Tevis. You fast Taanis Esther, you fast Friday. Our minhag seems to be like the other Rishonim that we go on Thursday. We try to avoid Friday, and however, even the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch brings down if you don't fast Thursday, you should fast Friday. So there's interesting chumrah or kapeda, I should say, Rav Chaim and the Rav, who are both Leviim like me, that they, for Mincha on Taanis Esther this year, they wouldn't take an Aliyah, because they felt it was a Safek Brachel of Atala. That really, according to many Rishonim, it's not even Taanis Esther. The Bishlam HaShachar is, it's Thursday, you're reading them, even though it's a different Kriya, but it's a day that's Mechuyev in Kriyas HaTorah. But Mincha, because it's Macholkas Rishonim, the Rav had a Kpeda, not to get, I guess the Gabbai don't call up the Rav. I guess, I don't know how far he took it. If push comes to shove, he was the only Levi in Shul. I don't know how far he would take it or not. But the minhag seems to be against, the briska. That's the briska chumrah, that both Rav Chaim and the Rav did not take an aliyah, on that day. So in the Megillah Esther, it mentions the word Purim 5 times, and 3 times it spells Purim without the Vav, 2 times it spells Purim complete with the Vav. So why is it that Purim's mentioned 5 times, and why 2 times it's spelled the appropriate way, the complete way, and 3 times it's spelled incomplete? So the Cheshek Shlomo in the beginning of Maseches Megillah says, because Megillah, the Gemara Megillah begins, Megillah Nikris, Megillah is read B'Yid Aleph, B'Yid Beis, B'Yid Gimel. It's read on the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th. Lo Pachas V'Lo Yotir. You can't read before the 11th, and you can't read after the 15th. So what do you mean? What do you mean? We don't read 11, 12, and 13. So the Mishnah explains that walled cities from the time of Yeshua ben Nun, they read on the 15th. Everyone else, regular cities, read on the 14th. So either it's the walled cities from the time of Yeshua ben Nun on the 15th, and everyone else reads on the 14th. However, the Mishnah says there are people who lived in small villages, and they used to come into the big cities anyway on Monday and Thursday. So therefore, the rabbis made a special dispensation for them. They were able, when they came in on the Yom HaKnisa, on the market day, let's say, which was either 11, 12, or 13, they were able to read Megillah Esther then. There was a special dispensation for their villagers. And the question is, what was this dispensation? Like who read the Megillah for who? So Rashi writes, it was the B'nai Ha'ir, the people in the city read the Megillah. Because the villagers didn't know how to read, that's why they came in the first place. And the Baal Koreh, from this Ben from the city used to read it for the villager. And Tosfos says, what are you talking about? We have a principle. I can only do a mitzvah for you if I have minimally the same level obligation. If I'm on a higher level, that's okay also. But I have to be at least on an equal level obligation to be moti, to be moti. So the Tosfos quotes the Yerushalmi that someone who lives in a walled city from the time of Yeshua ben Nun, which is supposed to be on the 15th, they walk into a city for the 14th, they can't read the Megillah. And the reverse. A Ben Krach can't read for a Ben Ahir, and a Ben Ahir can't read for a Ben Krach. So we see that if you're not obligated in the mitzvah, you can't do it for someone else. So Tosfos asked on Rashi, how can you tell me the people in the city read the Megillah for the villagers? Then how could they read on 11, 12, and 13? They're not obligated until the 14th. Hence, Tosfos rejects Rashi's opinion and says, no, it was the villagers who read themselves. They came into the city, they knew how to read, so why did they come into the city? It was just easier to meet. But the villagers, according to Tosfos, the villagers themselves read the Megillah on their own. They just met in the city. Well, to the Machlokes, Rashi and Tosfos is who read the Megillah for the people. According to Rashi, it was the people of the city. According to Tosfos, it was the Bnei Kfar, the villagers read themselves. You have a question? So, what is the issue? Like, why does Tosfos say, why isn't Tosfos like Rashi? Because Tosfos is like Rashi because he's saying you have to be someone who's obligated in the mitzvah. So the question is, what would Rashi answer? What would Rashi answer to the question? So there are many answers, but Rashi would answer is that it's true. Rashi, I agree with you, Tosfos, that a Ben Krach can't read for the one who lives in a walled city can't read for a regular city, and a regular city for a walled. But those are two different days. But really, the villagers, fundamentally, they are Bnei Eir. As the Ran writes, when did they do the other mitzvahs? When did they do Shalach Manas? When did they eat the Suda? On Yud Daled. So and in fact, if they end up back in the city on the 14th, they're obligated to hear the Megillah again. So really, what the Ran points out is it's not really a kasha. Rashi agrees with the Ben Krach and the Ben Eir, but the villages are fundamentally considered people who live in the cities, and therefore you read on the 14th. So therefore, it comes out that the facts are the same. That the 15th walled cities in the time of Yeshua ben Nun, 14th everyone else, and a special dispensation for the villagers, 11, 12, and 13, is you get to read when they come into the city. Who reads? According to Rashi, the Bnei Eir, the designated Baal Kori of the city reads, and according to Tosfos, no, the villagers themselves read. They knew how to read. They just needed a good meeting place. That's the Machlokes Rashi and Tosfos there. So the question is, there's something unique here going on. What do you mean the 11, 12, 13? But forget about that. 14 and 15, we know Torah Achasi. The Torah is one. It's uniformity. We want to form one. So it doesn't make sense. It's the only Yontif where, depending where you live, you celebrate a different day. In Israel, it's not an extra day. It's just Yontif Sheni. In other words, Purim is the only holiday where they set up 2 different days. So why is that? It goes against our general principle of uniformity, achdus, etc. So why is it that they set up the Purim day on 2 separate days? Right? The 14th and the 15th. So someone will point out because they just pointed out different days because the miracles happened in different times in different cities. So whenever they were saved, that's when they celebrated. However, there's a more fundamental answer. The Bear Yosef writes, the Cheshek Shlomo, that the reason why they picked 2 days is because there's a biblical prohibition of adding to the Torah, about Tosef, and about Tigra, taking away from the Torah. There's a biblical prohibition. So, like putting 5 species on a lulav and esrog, putting 5 parshas in the tefillin, you can't add to the Torah, or you can't diminish. The 613 mitzvahs, you can't make it 614 or 612. So, the Be'er Yosef points out the reason why the rabbis instituted 2 separate days for Purim is because they wanted to make it clear this is not a biblical holiday. In other words, there are 2 ways to violate Baal Tosef. Either you could put a 5th species in your lulav, you could put 5 parashos in the tefillin, that's one way, or Beis Din could say, you know what, eating chicken and milk together is a biblical prohibition. That's Baal Tosef on Beis Din because they are misrepresenting the Torah. They are saying, that's why it writes it twice, the prohibition of Baal Tosef, in Lashon Rabim and Lashon Yochid, in plural and in singular. So the writes it in plural, that applies to everyone. So that's adding to the lulav, adding to the tefillin. So that's one type of Baal Tosef. That adding, but the second type, and therefore that's in Lashon Rabim. Lashon Yochid is when he's talking to the Beis Din, that's the Baal Tosef there. When the Rambam writes, the Beis Din says eating chicken and milk together is biblical, that's Baal Tosef. So when the rabbis instituted the Yontif of Purim, they had to go out of the way to show we're not making this a biblical holiday. It's only a rabbinical holiday. You still have to celebrate it, but we don't have a right to make up, mitzvahs, and therefore we want to make it clear it's a rabbinical mitzvah. How can we make it clear? By doing something unique on Purim we don't find by other mitzvahs. Depending where you live, normally the rule is everyone's in it together. But here we have, here's an exception to the rule. That's why Purim is 2 separate days, and that's why also we find by Hanukkah. Hanukkah also is a rabbinical mitzvah, so the rabbis went out of the way. How do you fulfill Hanukkah? There are 3 ways, really, one candle per family, or a second level Mahadrin, you have 10 per family, so you have 10. And the third level, Mahadrin and Mahadrin, you keep on adding more, you had 80 people. So we usually don't find 3 different levels. We don't find Mahadrin and Mahadrin. Why did the rabbis go out of their way to specifically formulate the mitzvah like this? That's what the Be'er Yosef points out, to tell us that we make it clear it's only a rabbinical holiday and we're not in violation of Baal Tosef. And that's why I put them here 2 separate days. So to summarize, we discussed why is Purim mentioned 5 times, because the first 3 days, Yud Aleph Yud Beis, are incomplete Purim. So therefore it's spelled incomplete. It's only a day where they can read the Megillah, but it's not really Purim. Yud Dalet and Tet Vav are complete, so therefore, because those are days where the full Purim, we have all the mitzvahs hayom. And then we discussed the Machokes, Rashi and Tosfos, on who reads the Megillah. So Rashi says it was the Bnei Ha'ir. They come into the city, they read. And Tosfos, what do you mean? They can't read for you. They're not chayiv in the mitzvah like we find by a walled city to a regular city. And therefore he says the people in the villages read themselves. Alright, so what does Rashi do with the question? That if you're not obligated, how could you do it? So the Rashi would agree that In this case, it's okay because basically villagers are like people who live in a regular city, so they're really obligated on the Yadalit. So they're considered on the same level, and therefore they're able to. They're considered on the same level, and therefore you have the villagers reading for the villagers. Then we pointed out why is Purim set up on two separate dates. It goes against the general principle. So that's what the Rabbi Yosef and others point out. The rabbis went out of their way to show we are doing a rabbinical mitzvah, not a biblical, and we're not in violation of Al Tosef. Different types of Al Tosef. Even if Beis Din makes it look like a rabbinical mitzvah is biblical, so therefore they went out of their way to make Purim and Chanukah different. Everyone knows they're only rabbinical mitzvahs. Okay, we were discussing some differences between the Yontiv of Chanukah and the Yontiv of Purim. As Purim is approaching, actually a week today. Today is Zayin Adar, Moshe Rabbeinu's birthday and Yortzeit, and next week is the Yontiv of Purim. So we were discussing yesterday, one major difference is on Chanukah we have a mitzvah of Hallel. On Purim there doesn't seem to be a mitzvah of Hallel. As the Gemara explained, 3 reasons why we don't say Hallel on Purim. The answer number 1 was a geographical answer, that you only say Hallel on a miracle that happened in Eretz Israel. Of course the Gemara asked, what about the Exodus from Egypt? Last I checked, that didn't happen in Israel. So the Gemara says the old grandfather clause. It's only once Yoshua entered Eretz Israel, then Eretz Israel becomes a prerequisite. But obviously before then, it wasn't an issue. A2 was, we do say Hallel. It's just a different Hallel. Kriyasa Zu Halela. It's called Megillas Esther. It's just not called Hallel, but we do say it. And A3 is Akate Avdei Achashverosh Anan. That in order to say Hallel, you have to be complete. It's true we were saved from the decree of Haman, and we were saved and we were very happy. And it was a Yeshua, but we're still under the dominion of Achashverosh. As the Gemara tells us, the Jews didn't say Hallel until they were no longer Avdei Paro, they became Avdei Hashem. So as long as we were Avdei Achashverosh, we still couldn't say Hallel. So there's a fundamental difference between reasons 1 and 3 and reason number 2. According to reasons 1 and 3, it's not a day that warrants Hallel, either because it didn't happen in Israel or because we were still Avdei Achashverosh. But according to A2, we do say Hallel. It is a day that warrants Hallel. In fact, the Meiri goes so far as to say that what happens if you live in a town where there is no Megillas Esther? So what do you do? So the Meiri says, well, of course, he passes obviously like A2 and says, well, if you live in a town where there is no Megillas Esther, you recite Hallel. That is the opinion, and it's logically compelling. Why not? If Kriyasa Zu Halela and there is no Megillas Esther, the logical conclusion would be to say Hallel. Yet we don't paskin like this Meiri. How come? So the Mefarshim point out because there are 2 different types of Hallel. We know there's Hallel HaGadol, Hallel HaMitzvah, different names for the Hallel. But one Hallel you say on when God does Nisim Neflos, He breaks the laws of Teva. Yetzias Mitzrayim, Kriyas Yamsuf, we say Hallel when we recognize the supernatural nays. And there's a totally separate type of Hallel, everyday life, that we thank God on God within Teva, when God does things behind the scenes. In fact, that's the famous Meshach Chochmah, that how come the apparent contradiction in the Gemara. The Gemara in Bracha says one who says Ashrei 3 times a day is Zocha to Olam Haba. But one who says Hallel every day is a Magadef and a Macharev. He's a blasphemer. Last I checked, they both come from Sefer Tehillim. So how could one time I say Tehillim I'm great, another time I'm terrible? So that's what the Meshach Chochmah explains. Another is that what does Hallel represent? When you did a miracle. So if a person has the attitude, God, you're as good as your last at bat. Yeah, when you do another miracle for me, then maybe I'll get back to you. But until then, forget about it. If you only see God on the supernatural miracles, then you are a Magadev. But one who sees God in the everyday things, Ashrei, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, that type of attitude, you'll be Zochet Olam Haba. So the Nisim of Pesach are Nisim of breaking the laws of Teva. So that Hallel is appropriate. But Purim, it's the only it's the only book of Tanakh that doesn't have God's name in it. Esther, Hester Panim. You can read the whole story, and many do, as one big coincidence. This happened, he couldn't sleep, he took out the book. So Purim represents seeing God through Derech HaTeva. And in fact, that's why perhaps that's the Chazal, that Megillas Esther, even L'Asid Lavo, will be around. Because that's a lesson we have to take with us all the time, not just seeing God in miracles, but seeing God every day. And that's the pshat. It's true, as the Meiri says, that if you say Kriyas Zu Halela, then it makes sense you should say Hallel. But we say no, because it's a different type of Hallel. Chazal instituted a Hallel of Derech HaTeva on Purim, not a Hallel of Nisim Niflos, and therefore it's inappropriate to recite the Hallel we normally say on Purim.
But we must say, according to the Meiri says this is a Hallel. So there's no other terrace. So how do you explain the Meiri that says that it is a Hallel? Because there's two aspects to all Hallel, B'Shev and Roido. And therefore we have another dimension to it. By relating the Derech HaTeva and Vizgalus HaBorei, and that becomes the epitome of Derech HaTeva through a Hallel. And the Hallel has to be Magid the story. That's why we say the story of Hanukkah in the Shmona Esrei. The story becomes the Hallel. And therefore Hallel is not only to sing Shem Roidot HaKadosh Baruch Hu, thank you, but it's to relate in all. That's why Bolchi Nafshi is a form of Hallel.
And that's why the Rambam in his Hakdama to Chanukah, he goes through the whole story.
And on that basis, understand the Meiri. The Meiri says when you tell the story, that is the Hallel. The story in itself, whether it's Derech HaTeva or Shaloi Derech HaTeva, that becomes like Bolchi Nafshi's Derech HaTeva.
And that's how they explain the two different types of Hallels we have. Leil Seder, we split up the Hallel. The Hallel before the meal, the Hallel after, they make the same chiluk, yeah.
So the Meiri becomes already the word that is consistent.
Very good. So that's one of the major differences. Another major difference between Chanukah and Purim is on Purim you have a Chi of Suda. Even though according to the Rambam on Chanukah you do, but the straight psak in the Shulchan Aruch is, even though you're supposed to have a Suda and sing Shiros v'Tishbachos, however, there is no Chi of Suda on Purim. However, on Purim there is a Chi of Suda. So how come by Purim we have a Chi of Suda and by Chanukah there is no Chi of Suda? So the famous answer of the Lavush is that there are two different types of persecutions. On Chanukah, it was a much more of a spiritual one. The Greeks didn't want us dead. They wanted us to assimilate, to take on the Greek culture, and they would have been happy. There wouldn't have been a war. When we said no, we wanted to keep the Torah, so then they went out with war on us. But it wasn't fundamentally a physical war. It was a spiritual war to assimilate, become like the Hellenists. However, by Purim, it was totally different. By Purim, there wasn't an option. It was Haman, it was Hitler. You're Jewish, we want you dead. In fact, as we know, throughout Jewish history, the two types of anti-Semitism. There's the genetic anti-Semitism and there's the religious anti-Semitism. Obviously, both are illogical, but at least we can understand a little bit about from the religious point of view. It's a contest, who has the better religion, and therefore, as Rav Yonas Eibshin said, when one of the Galachim tried to tell him to convert to his religion, he said, well, my father told me a long time ago, if I have a horse and you have a horse and you want to give me money with my horse, then it shows that my horse is worth more. So you're trying to talk me into converting, it shows my religion's better. But either way, there's two types of anti-Semitism. There's the religious and there's the genetic. And in fact, that's why we have the two types. That we have the Amalek, and then we have the Esav. Halacha v'yadua she'esav sonei Yaakov. So that with Amalek, it was right by Har Sinai. So that was one type, and then we have the other type and that's what when Yaakov was praying before he was meeting Esav, Hatzileni na miyadachi miyad Esav, save me from my hands of my brother, save me from the hands of Esav. Last I checked, everyone knows Esav and Yaakov are brothers. So why is the Torah repeating some extra words? Either say save me from Esau, but save me from my brother. That's the famous Beis Halevi and others, that the two types of anti-Semitism. They come as our brother, as they come to assimilate us into marriage, etc. And then there's the Esau coming with the sword. And in fact, the fact that brother comes first, that even though it might be a little more pleasant, but it's a much more dangerous one. Today we don't have to look too far where we live, and we don't want to go back to pogroms, but we live in an open society, and it's probably 50% plus intermarriage rate. That's the much more dangerous one, because that's once someone intermarries, it's over. As the old minig in Europe was, I mean, it's bad either way, but if a Gentile man marries a Jewish girl, at least it's not over. The kid's still Jewish. But if the guy married a non-Jewish woman, they used to sit shiva in Europe, because that was it. That's Yarog Ve'al Yavor. Basically, it's over. The kids aren't Jewish anymore. So the two types so by Purim it was much more physical. By Hanukkah it was spiritual. So we want to celebrate in a physical way. So we have Chiyuv Suda on Purim in contrast to Hanukkah. However, they explain another reason why, based on the Shiltis, that the Gemara tells us in Shabbos. We had it a while ago, so if I don't remember it. Now, Peiches Amud Beis, the Gemara talks about, but we read it a couple of weeks ago in the Torah. So, Yitzatzu b'tachtis Har. By Har Sinai, the Jewish people was standing under the mountain, and the Gemara has a famous drasha, Kofel of Har Kegigis. The Gemara says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu turned the mountain over and said, I'll give you a choice. Either you accept the Torah, mutav, if not, here will be your burial place. And there the Gemara says, Mikan Mod Rabba the rice. From here, we see that if you accept on the interest, it's not binding. And then the Gemara concludes, but the Jews re-accepted the Torah at Har Sinai during the time of Purim. Kimu v'kiblu ha-Yehudim. So there's a discussion. What about before Purim? How are we responsible? That's a separate discussion. But on Purim time, they accepted the Torah b'Ava. So we have a general rule. The Ramban writes. We read in Parashas Mishpatim last week, Vayochu Vayishtu. At Har Sinai, the Jewish people were partying, they were eating and drinking. And from here, the Ramban writes, we learn a very important halacha. Anytime you have any accomplishment of Torah, Gamro Shel Torah, the minig of a Siyam, we have food. Anytime you have any completion of the Torah, we celebrate in a physical way. So that's what the Mefarshim point out here. By Purim, the reason why Purim, we have a Chiyuv Suda, is because it was a Kabbalah HaTorah, that we accepted the Torah. It was a re-accepting of the Torah. How do we know that we accepted it? So the Marsha, others explained the fact that we accepted more mitzvahs. We took on Megillah, Shalach Manas, and other mitzvahs. We accepted a Piyava. And that's how they explain why Purim is, we also have a Chiyuv Suda.